Hey guys, welcome to the channel. So it's finally time for the Sega Genesis Mini review. I wanted to make sure that I sat down and had plenty of time with the system before I made this video. In this review, I'm going to try and not compare the Sega Genesis Mini to any of the other mini systems. Also, I'm not going to take into account anything you can add to the system through hacking or modding. To be fair, I'm going to review this system as is right out of the box. So the Sega Genesis Mini released September 19th, 2019. This is a throwback to when the Sega Dreamcast was released back on 9/9/99. It retails for $80 and includes 42 games. Let's open up the box and see what's inside. The box of the Sega Genesis Mini includes one instruction manual. It's literally 2 pages long, then everything else is in just a different language. That guy's pretty cool though. The USB and micro USB power cable, the USB power adapter, a standard HDMI cable, 2 wired 3-button USB Sega Genesis controllers. The Genesis Mini controllers are an exact replica of the old Genesis controllers, complete with the same D-pad and the A, B, C, and start buttons. And the Sega Genesis Mini console. The system itself looks exactly like the old Sega Genesis, minus the USB ports in the front. You have the 2 USB controller ports, labeled controller 1 and 2, a false headphone jack. On the top you have your on and off switch, a reset button that takes you to the menu of the system, and a volume slider. This is just cosmetic, it does not actually control the volume of the system. You have an LED power light that will turn red when the system is turned on. On the rear of the system you have HDMI output and a micro USB port for power. On the top of the system the game slot does open up, but it is empty inside. On the bottom of the system you do have this plastic piece and it does come off. This is what connected the Sega Genesis to the Sega CD. If this were the Japanese Mega Drive, you could connect this to the Sega Mini Tower. And there you have it, everything that comes in the box for the Sega Genesis Mini. So in terms of the aesthetics of the Sega Genesis Mini, Sega did an excellent job. This is a perfect representation of the system. But even though it looks like a Sega Genesis, these mini systems are only as good as the games that come on them. Let's take a look at a few games that come on the system.
Welcome to your doom.
One special note I do want to make is the inclusion of Mega Man The Wily Wars. In the past, when trying to emulate this game, it ran very slowly. And you can see here, the version that comes on the Genesis Mini plays perfectly. And that was only a small handful of what the Sega Genesis Mini brings to the table. There's a ton of top-selling games on here, arguably some of the best on the system, and they control, look, and sound just like they did on the original. One of the biggest complaints about the system, at least over here in the States, were the controllers. Not the controllers themselves, but that they weren't the 6-button controllers. I didn't grow up with a Sega Genesis personally, but I did play a lot over at my best friend's house, so I don't know how not having a 6-button controller affected the system, so I did a little research. I found out that out of the 42 games, only 7 of them have 6-button controller accessibility. And honestly, out of those 7, only 2 of them are really affected heavily. For the other 5, the 6-button controller doesn't change much in the gameplay, but it does make menuing and things like that a lot easier. For example, in Beyond Oasis, the X, Y, and Z buttons are shortcuts to the map, weapon screen, and item screen. In Contra Hardcore, the X, Y, and Z buttons alternate between Shot 1 and Shot 2. Shot 1 allows you to shoot and move at the same time. Shot 2 allows you to shoot while stationary. In Comic Zone, the buttons allow you to use the items in your inventory assigned to that specific button slot. So hitting the Z button uses the item all the way to the right, Y uses the item in the middle, and X will use the item to the left. In Virtua Fighter 2, having a 6-button controller allows you to change your button assignments. You can have it so the punch and kick are at Y and Z, or you can have a combination of defense, punch, and kick assigned to X, Y, and Z. In Shinobi 3, you can completely change your control scheme with a 6-button controller. It involves accessing a secret options menu that I wasn't able to do with my current 6-button controller because it does not have a mode button. It basically turns your controller into this. So I got the Retrobit Sega Saturn controller. And I got this for 2 reasons. One, because I wanted to have a Sega Saturn controller to play my Sega Saturn games on my PC, and because the Amazon listing said it was compatible with the Sega Genesis Mini. So this controller as an alternative, for the most part, works perfectly. The only game where you cannot use this as a 6-button controller is Shinobi 3, because there is no mode button. As for the 2 games where, in my opinion, you really need that 6-button controller, you have Eternal Champions and Street Fighter 2. Both of these games are 6-button fighting games, meaning you have a light, medium, and hard punch, and a light, medium, and hard kick. When using the 3-button controller, you have the choice of either having 3 punch buttons or 3 kick buttons. Hitting the start button switches between punches and kicks. It makes these games almost unplayable, especially if you're a hardcore Street Fighter or Eternal Champions fan. So having that 6-button controller changes these games completely and makes these games a ton more fun to play. So we've talked about the physical aspects of the system, the games included, and we've addressed the issue with having a 3-button controller. All that we have left is the menu and the user interface, so let's take a look. So here we are with the Sega Genesis Mini. Using the D-pad on the controller, you can scroll through the 42 games included. Hitting the B button on the controller goes into bookshelf mode, never before seen on a mini system. Hitting the B button one more time will return you back to the original view. The sort options are alphabetical, by genre, number of players, and release date. Going into the settings menu, we have the following options. You have the health warning and the QR code where you can view the game manuals. 8 different language options. The 2 screen options are 4:3 or full screen. You can hit the C button to apply a CRT filter, which is indicated by an icon in the top right. You have 3 options for wallpapers. There is no wallpaper, a nice retro styled background, and a background with speakers, a TV, and Sonic in the corner. The last 3 settings are the staff credits, legal notices, and the ability to reset your system to factory settings. When cycling through your games, you can see in the bottom right how many players can play each game as well as the genre. You've got action, fighting, run and gun, shoot 'em up, fantasy, racing, and puzzle. The excellent menu music was created by Yuzo Koshiro, the music composer for Streets of Rage 2. When selecting a game to play, you're given the release year as well as a small description of the game. To access the in-game menu, you just have to hold down the start button for a few seconds. You're given 4 slots for save states. When highlighting one of the save states, you can hit the C button to lock that save data so you don't accidentally delete it. You can also choose to reset the game, and very rarely do we see this, return to the main menu. No longer do you have to get up and hit the reset button on the system itself. You can stay seated and do it directly from the controller. Another small detail, but something I really personally like, is the menu cursor. I like how the light pulsates and how you have that little laser beam that travels around the game. It's a small touch, but I think it's really nice. If I had to have one gripe about this menu, it's that if you're at the bottom of the game list and you want to go directly to your settings, you can't. You have to scroll up through all the other games until you can finally get to your options. Again, not a huge deal, but it was something I noticed when I was at the bottom of the list and I wanted to change one of these screen settings or change my border. You could always hit the B button to go into bookshelf mode and then go up a little bit quicker that way. A small Easter egg that was brought to my attention by SKUFO in the comments section: if you go to the settings menu and to languages, you can actually change the game type. If you select Japanese and go back to your games menu, you'll see you now have a Mega Drive Mini with the Japanese box art and the Japanese versions of all these games. If you choose the Italian or German languages, you get the European version of the Sega Mega Drive Mini. This doesn't change the games you have access to, it just changes the versions of the games you have on your US system. There you have it, everything you need to know about the Sega Genesis Mini. Some pros for the system: it looks exactly like a Sega Genesis. It's got a large number of great games on here, and they're all top titles. Some of the cons are the lack of border options, the CRT filter, and of course the 3-button controllers. More specifically for me, when I first played this on a live stream, my C button on one of my controllers got stuck. It didn't affect both controllers, but I did notice it after maybe about an hour and a half of playing. And I did get comments from other people about other buttons of theirs getting stuck. So that's something you may want to consider as well, unless you're planning on getting a couple 6-button controllers to replace these. Overall, Sega did an excellent job with the Mini. It absolutely contends with all the other ones that have come out. If you are a fan of the Sega Genesis, I highly recommend you get the system. Or maybe if you're somebody who didn't grow up with the system and you're interested in these games and you never got the chance to, this is an excellent way to get started. If you're interested in purchasing anything I talked about in this video, I will have links in my description to those items. So you know what's coming next, right? That's all I have for you today, so as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. This is the part of the video where I thank those users who support the channel through Patreon: Eric Cologne, Jordy Alex, William Wind, Mike Muniz, Sam Torres, Yaroslav Orudzov, Den Cardoso, Andre G, and Batman.